To finish up this last session this afternoon before you get a little break, and if there's any chance of us finishing on time, we need to get started. Been running just a little bit behind, but we appreciate you as the faithful that are hanging on and all the way to the end. So this session that we're going to do this hour is called Outreach Ideas, or Outreach for the Church. Now, if you were in any one of the other sessions that I did this morning, outreach is one of what I consider to be essential systems that the church has to have, and I think it's a very important one. And so that's why I have a kind of a separate seminar to talk about outreach, because I have discovered, and I'll kind of share some of this as we go through this, but I think one of the things that a lot of churches are really struggling with, and that probably one of the things that we do poorly in the church is outreach. And I know that not every church fits in that category, and so if your church is doing good outreach, that's great. But most churches struggle in this area, and so what I want to talk about this afternoon with this is just some real practical things about outreach and about things that we can do in the church to really have an impact on our community. And again, please understand that I'm approaching all of these seminars that I do from kind of the nuts and bolts, practical side of it, assuming that a lot of the stuff that Jim deals with in the revitalization topics and things about the spiritual context and prayer and all of that stuff is kind of assumed when I'm doing these seminars. Okay, so if you've got serious issues, spiritual issues in your church and that sort of thing, obviously you need to deal with that and work those things out, or else you're not going to be successful in programming and that sort of thing. But this topic of outreach, I think, is something that every church needs to really think about and plan for. And if the truth is known, I think a lot of our churches don't think much about outreach. We think that, we have services and we welcome visitors to come to our church, and we just expect the world to come to us. And I really think that if you look at the actual word itself, outreach, what that word implies is that we in the church need to reach out into the world. The church is kind of a unique entity in that, we do our thing inside these walls, and we expect the world to come in and just accept and be a part of what we do, when really the Great Commission tells us that we are to go into the world and reach them. And so, I'm all for making our church services visitor friendly. I'm all for, and I'll talk tomorrow about creating a wow experience to help, attract and retain guests and all that. All that's fine. All that's good. But you have to remember that the church is really for the church. It's to edify and to build up the body of Christ. And the church is then to go out into the world and reach the world for Jesus Christ and bring them in. It's really not the world's responsibility to come find us at church. It's our responsibility to go out and find them and bring them in. And so that's what outreach implies. And so that's what we're going to talk about with outreach. And please forgive me if I keep turning around, but I want to make sure I'm on the right slide. So let's talk a little bit about what outreach really is, or how do you define outreach. Outreach means, literally, if you look at the definition of the word, there's a verb and a noun usage, but the verb is to reach beyond. That's what outreach means, to reach beyond these four walls, or this place that we call church, this building. Outreach is to reach beyond this place that we are. The noun form of the word is the act of reaching out, or an effort to build connections from one person or a group to another. And so outreach is your church reaching out to connect with the community around you to help meet a need, to help bring about healing, restoration in your community, or whatever. And I have people ask me all the time, what are some great outreach things that we can do in our church? And there's probably some universal things that I think every church could benefit from. But the thing that I always tell people, and what I would tell you today, is you know best of what kind of outreach you need to have in your church, because you live in that context. I don't live in the context of your church. And so you need to figure out what your community needs, You need to figure out what are some areas that you can really be impactful and some ways that you can do some things to really make an impact on your surrounding area, and then do something that meets a need in that area. And so that's what outreach is. And obviously every community needs Christ, but there are other things that your community needs that will better allow you to introduce them to Christ, and that will better allow you to meet certain needs and all of that. And we'll talk about some specific ideas later. But here's the big question that I want you to really think about. What does your community need? And that's going to be different for different people. If you are in a, more of a middle to upper class, more of an affluent neighborhood or area, then you probably don't need to do the same type of outreach that a church in a lower class socioeconomic place would need to do to reach different needs, or to meet different needs and reach different people. I mean, it's going to be different. And so you've got to figure out what your community needs, and then try to do things that are going to reach the people in your community. Probably one of the worst things that a church can do, and I've seen this over and over and over, and you have too, is to just have a drive-in church that's set down in the middle of a community that doesn't look like their community, doesn't have anyone there from their community, doesn't meet any needs in their community. What good is your church in a community that it can't meet any needs in your community? And so we've got to figure out what our community needs. If you don't like the community you're in, move to another community and reach them. But there's churches all over the country that are churches just like what I'm describing here is that the community around them may be one particular race or economic class or whatever, and no one in the church looks like that. And it's because the community around the church has changed over the years, but that church has stayed exactly the same. And it's only a matter of time. You're only a few funerals away from that church, being out of existence. Right. And so we've got to figure out what our community really needs. That's what you need to figure out. And once you figure out what your community needs, then you can do some things, hopefully, to help reach that community and to connect with the community around you. So let's talk about the importance of outreach. Of course, we have the biblical mandate, the Great Commission in Matthew chapter 28 talks about that what our responsibility is, and that we are to go into all the world, and that we are to reach people, that we are to take the church on the road, if you will. The church isn't this building. This building is where the church meets. And the church is wherever we are as individual Christians. We are the church. And so we are to go out into the world and to reach people. And so I want you to think about this. This is kind of the big idea. And I mentioned this earlier in the session that I had this morning, but I believe this is so true, that outreach is the only way your church will see sustainable and significant growth. If your church is not focusing on outreach or not doing something to reach your community, it's only a matter of time until your church is going to be on a plateau or decline if it's not already there. We've got to think about outreach. It's got to be something that is on the forefront of our mind. There are going to be a few people in your church that have babies, and you may add a few members of people that move into your area that were Free Will Baptist somewhere else and they want to go to a Free Will Baptist church. But most people, if your church is going to grow, it's going to have to grow by reaching people that live in the community around you. And so you've got to be thinking about outreach. You've got to be planning for outreach. A lot of things we're going to talk about in this session this afternoon. So, it's the mandate of the Bible in the Great Commission that we are to go into the world, and that's what hopefully we get out of this today. But really, when we talk about outreach and we think about outreach, outreach is kind of the middle piece of a three-piece puzzle. The three pieces are really very simple, but a lot of times we jump right into kind of the outreach piece of it, and the other things aren't as strong, and so we have problems with that. So let's back up a little bit, first of all, and let's talk about piece one, which is planning. You can't do successful outreach without planning. And so there's a lot of hard work that goes in, a lot of times months before you ever have any kind of an outreach event. And I want you just to think about some event that you do at your church, whether it's an annual homecoming event, or if it is a vacation Bible school, or whatever it might be. Those kinds of events where you hope that the public or people from your community are going to come to your facility, those take a lot of planning. And so we need to do things to make sure that everything is in place so that once the event happens, that it's a successful event. I mean, nobody wants to plan this big event and nobody show up. And so you've got to do a good job of planning. And then the second piece is the actual outreach event itself. That we'll talk more about that later. And then the third piece is follow-up. If you have a great outreach event and a lot of people show up, but you don't have any way to follow up with them and to actually, find out who they are and that sort of thing, then you may have had a great event, but it's not really what it should be if you don't have the opportunity to follow up on them. My point with that is that outreach can be for a lot of purposes, but in my mind, there's really one key and one main point to all outreach, and that is to introduce people to Christ. And so if we have outreach, whether it's off campus, in the park somewhere, or at a city event or whatever, or if it's on site where we do a carnival or a fall festival or a concert or some series teaching thing or whatever, all of those things are to try to introduce people to our church and let them know we love them and we care about them and that we're concerned about our community and that we're trying to meet needs in our community. But ultimately the goal is to bring people to church for an opportunity for them to experience the thing we do at church and love on them and introduce them to Jesus Christ. I mean, that's what the main purpose of outreach is. And so none of these pieces can be missing when to really have successful outreach. You need all of them, and they're all equally important. So let's talk about some things that are important, just some things that about outreach that you need to be thinking about. First of all, you need a budget for it. They say that you can tell by your checkbook the things that are really important to you. And nobody uses checkbooks anymore, so I don't know what you look at nowadays. Credit card receipt, I guess. But the things that we budget for, the things that we spend our money on, really do tell what we think are important. And this came through a very difficult lesson for me, actually. When I was pastoring a good number of years ago, our church talked a lot about outreach, and we said, hey, we're going to really focus on outreach, and we want to do some things to really reach our community and to make a difference in this place and all of that. And I'll never forget this particular event, but our trustee board was sitting down at a meeting to work on our budget for the next year. And we were talking about different things that we wanted to do and tweaking the numbers here and there and trying to balance the budget and making sure we had a little more money for, the things that we needed to spend a little more on and where we could save money. And you've been through budget meetings. You know what I'm talking about. And so we started talking about various different events we wanted to do and all of that and why people were talking and why this meeting was going on. I started thinking about outreach. And I thought, we might need to look at that outreach number. We've been talking about trying to do more in outreach. We might need to bump this number up. And so I'm looking through the lines of the budget, every line item, and I'm looking for outreach. How much should we spend on outreach? How much is in the budget? And I kept looking, and I kept looking, and I kept looking, and all of a sudden, it dawned on me. I came to the terrible realization. We talked a lot about outreach, but we didn't even have a line for it in our budget. There was no line for outreach. Now, we had Vacation Bible School. We had pulpit supply for like special services where we invited guest speakers to come in to have money to give them an honorarium or whatever. But I'm talking about like a line in the budget to do outreach events. We didn't have a line in our budget. And I was convicted, and I told our guys at that meeting, I said, guys, we talked a lot about the importance of doing outreach, and we want to be doing more and all of this, but we need to put our money where our mouth is. If we really think outreach is important, if we really want to do some things to reach our community, we probably need to, allocate some money. And we did. And then God started doing some incredible things, and I could tell you all kinds of stories, which I will tell you in a little bit, one story, but just amazing things, how God started just blessing because of our efforts. I believe in really focusing on our community and doing some things and putting our money where our mouth was to budget for outreach. The second thing is you've got to plan for it. You've got to plan for outreach. The same effort that you put into things that happen every week in your church or whatever can't be the same effort that you put into outreach events, because those are unique and they're different, and they take special planning. They take a lot of effort, a lot of volunteers, a lot of things to be successful. And so you've got to plan, and you've got to plan really well for outreach events. And it may seem really simple to say, well, we want to put on a kids carnival or an Easter egg hunt at the Saturday before Easter, whatever. I mean, that may sound like it's no big deal, but if you start thinking about all of the details that go into that, you better be planning really well. And the church that Lori, my wife, and I are attending in Nashville, since we've been in Nashville just a little over 2 years, and the church was kind of in a restructure phase, and had a new pastor had come just before we went there, and he really started focusing on some of these things, and I was kind of helping him think through some things and all of that, and we planned our first Easter egg hunt, since he'd been there and since we'd been there and all of that. And so, we were thinking, well, what should we plan for? What's a good number to plan for? We thought, well, church has never done anything like this before. If we had 200 kids show up from the community, that would be a huge win for us. If we could just, have that many people here. So we're going to do X amount of eggs. I don't even remember what the number was now of how many eggs or whatever. We started planning and really promoting this event in our community and all that. When the day actually came, we knew we were in trouble when the cars started pulling into the parking lot. I mean, cars were everywhere. We could not park the people in our parking lot, and kids from all over the community were coming in, and it was like every kid got 4 or 5 eggs. It was embarrassing. I mean, it was like we did not plan for this thing. We had no idea what we were really getting ourselves into. And so we ran out of hot dogs, we ran out of eggs, we ran out of everything. I mean, it was hugely successful in the fact that we got that many people on our church property for that event. And so the next year we planned a lot better, and we still had a huge crowd. It's been a hugely successful thing for our church. But you've got to plan, and you've got to over plan to make sure that everything is prepared for, and there's no surprises and all of that. The last thing you want to do is host some event at your church and then be embarrassed when everybody gets there because you run out of something or something doesn't work right or whatever, so you've got to plan for it. The next step is you've got to recruit help. You can't do this stuff by yourself. There's no possible way. As a pastor, as a leader, you've got to recruit help from people in your church. And again, there's a lot of steps to this. I'm making kind of broad strokes over all this, and you're going to have to go back with the fine detail brush and paint in all the pretty things about it, because these are just the general ideas. But you're going to have to recruit help to make sure that all those areas are covered. Set up and tear down, food, registration, even into the finer details of every step of everything that you do in your church. And so you've got to recruit help. And then you've got to also expect results. You've got to expect results. And I think that a lot of times the results that we get are the results that we expect. And if we don't expect much to happen, probably a lot of times not much is going to happen. And I remember going into a particular event at our church, and I'll tell you more about this in just a few minutes. But it was a new thing for us, and we didn't know what we were doing. We kind of got in over our heads, and we knew that, but we were trusting kind of this whole thing to happen like it was supposed to happen. And we partnered with a ministry, a company that was coming in and helping us, and they told us step by step, you do this, 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 and this. And this will happen if you'll plan, and we believed it. We believed it, and we planned it. We did everything they told us to do, exactly like they told us to do it. Even though I didn't think step C and F were necessary, we did them anyway, just because that's what the expert said to do or whatever. And we were waiting with these great expecting these great results and these great things to happen. And God showed up, and God did great things. And because I believe, we worked for it and we expected God to do great things, then God did do great things. And so we need to expect results. So planning. Planning is so important because, again, this is long before the outreach actually happens. It's long before you actually get to the point to where the big day is there or whatever, but it is that necessary work that has to go in before you can ever, see the great things happen. And I believe that outreach must be a priority in your church. A lot of times we set a lot of, importance on a lot of things that probably aren't nearly as important as outreach. And we need to check our priorities and make sure that the things that we're doing in our church are really the most important things. And that's why planning is so important. And, going back to the team and not doing it yourself, we need to, sit down with the team and try to brainstorm ideas and figure out what it is that our community needs, and then figure out what are some things that we can do to meet the needs in our community. I think also a good thing to do is consult with community leaders. Every city has a city planner or a mayor or somebody there that can help you figure out what some needs might be in your community. And if your community leaders, for example, say that they could use help with a certain event that they do or whatever, partner with your city, partner with a civic club or whatever to do as much as you can to make an impact on your community. I talked about this earlier in the session this morning in systems about just making an identity for your church or branding your church in the community. And I know that sounds really superficial and unspiritual, but people need to know who you are in this community and in your community. They need to know who whatever name of your church is, they need to know who you are in that community. And they need to know that you're concerned about who they are and their kids and their well-being and all of that sort of stuff. They need to know you care about them and that you're doing things that will hopefully, fulfill a need in that community and help that community be a better community. And so consult with your community leaders on the things that they need, and then design your events to meet those needs. Sometimes the needs that your community have will be a spiritual need, but sometimes it'll be a physical or a practical need, and we need to be willing to do whatever that we can to meet those needs. And I think that we need to be willing to think outside the box and do things that maybe we've never done before. We had a lady in our church when I was pastoring in Oklahoma that worked for our county extension office. And the county extension office education specialist did the parenting classes for the DHS mandated parenting classes. So in other words, if a child was taken out of a home by the county because of neglect or abuse or whatever, those parents were court ordered to attend child rearing classes. And this educational specialist at our county extension office taught those classes. And the lady that worked for her went to our church, and she came to me and said, we're looking for a place that we can hold these classes. So would you let the church host these classes here at our church in one of our classrooms? And I said, absolutely. I mean, what better chance, getting those people. And so we cleaned the building. We made sure everything was, in the best shape. We set up the tables. It was extra trouble. We had to turn on some lights and some air conditioning that normally wouldn't be running and all that. It probably cost us a little bit of money. And we set up a table right there in the foyer of our church, and we put a nice tablecloth on it, and we had all our brochures about our church on the table. And when they walked in the door, these rough, and I'm telling you, these are rough. These are parents that had their kids taken away from them, okay? So, they weren't like, model citizen type people. These are like real people that have problems, like our community has problems, okay? They're like Jim Kilgore's people that he deals with his, right? We're real, right? That's what we're talking about. And that's like all of us in our community. That's who we're dealing with in our communities. They're messed up people with problems. And they don't always look like us, and they don't always act like us, they don't always dress like us, and all that stuff. And I remember it was only after a couple of classes that lady, the educational specialist, came to me and she said, I think it'd be good to have a man actually in the classes teaching. Would you help me teach some of these classes? And I'm like, can I say what I want to say? She said, absolutely. And I said, can I tell them that they need to have Jesus in their home and they need to go to church? She said, you tell them whatever you want to tell them. I said, absolutely. And I went in with her and I started helping teach these child rearing classes to these parents who had their kids taken away from them by DHS. I mean, that's ugly. It's messy. It costs the church some money, like I said, and it made our janitor have to clean up some extra mess, which our janitor happened to be the lady that worked for the educational specialist on the side, so that worked out good. But I'm just saying that sometimes, there's needs that we don't even think about, but that was a need in our community. I found out through all of that stuff and through dealings with this whole department for our county and stuff, that we were in terrible need of foster parents in our county. It was like we only had like 2 foster parent families in our entire county. And so that meant whenever a child was taken out of their home by DHS, and I don't know what you guys call it in California, it's what it was in Oklahoma, but I'm talking about the county that Child Protective Services or whatever. Yeah. They not only ripped these kids out of their homes, they took them out of their schools and had to put them in different counties because there was not enough families in our county to handle all the kids that were being taken out of their homes. And that broke my heart, and to think about all the need that we had right there in our community. And we started trying to do more children events and things for families and reaching people in our community. And so outreach, is just so important. And so many times we think about outreach as our visitation program or vacation Bible school or the things that we're already doing. But I want to challenge you to think about anything that you can do to reach people in your community and help meet needs in your community. And so outreach events are to meet needs, but they're also designed to draw new people. And they're designed to draw people that don't have any connection with your church. They don't have any loyalty to your church. And that's why I do the seminar I'm going to do tomorrow on creating a wow factor. And I'll steal a little of my own thunder and tell you a little bit what I'm going to talk about in that session tomorrow. But when people come and visit your church, they don't have any skin in the game. If they don't come back next week, no big deal to them. There's 20 churches around they can choose to go to. And so you need to be a church that loves them and that makes them feel welcome, and you need to wow them so that they'll come back. Why? Because you want to have some, just build big numbers? No, because those people need to hear about Jesus. And you can't tell them about Jesus, and you can't win them, and you certainly can't disciple them if they don't come back. And so we've got to get them to come so that we can, present the gospel to them and help them move along in their lives. So here's some essential steps to make sure that you're, ready to do all this stuff, because there's a lot of steps to this. And again, I'll talk more about this in my session about creating the wow factor, but just real quick overview of some things. Look at your property. Jim, did you already do your seminar on the Yeah, okay. I love that session. I love to hear him do the guarantee principles for church failure. Everything he said, amen. Okay, so excellent stuff. I love the way he presents and all that. But just look at your property. Clean up your property, make it attractive, make sure that people feel at home and know what they're supposed to do. Make sure your children's area is well staffed and clean. Make sure that there are children's workers in there. Upgrade your signage inside and out. Make sure that people are comfortable knowing where they're supposed to go and all of that stuff. Just make stuff guest friendly. That's the best way I can say it. Make everything guest friendly. You know what you're going to do at your church service, and your regular attenders know what your church service is going to look like. But people that come to your church don't know that. And it's really kind of an uncomfortable feeling, not knowing what's going to happen, what's going to go on, what are they going to expect, what are they going to have me do, are they going to want me to stand up and introduce myself, or more awkwardly than that, are they going to make me sit down and everybody else stand up so they can greet me as like I'm feeling all, singled out and weird and all that. Just make your services as guest friendly as you can. Now, again, I'm not talking about anything to do with watering down the gospel or whatever. Please, I hope you know, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying to make the experience as good as it can so that you can preach to them Jesus and Him crucified, and that we can really have an opportunity to speak to them. And so we've just got to improve our worship services so that they flow and that we, help people feel at ease and comfortable. And then we've got to be willing to follow up appropriately, and we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. So let's talk about some outreach event ideas. So the first thing is the planning. The second thing are the actual events. I tell people all the time, outreach is only limited by your imagination. I mean, there are so many things that you can do for outreach ideas, and I'm only going to give you just a few things that I've either personally done or I've seen others do that had some success or whatever. And I'll break it down in a couple of categories. The first one is on-site events. So these are things you can do at your church. The first one is what we call a block party, or a carnival or whatever. Anything you can do to involve children or bring children is great, because kids like to come. If they see an inflatable or 3 inflatables going up in your parking lot or on your front lawn or whatever, that's going to attract the attention of kids. If they know there's candy going to be given away, or there's prizes, there's clowns and balloons, or there's whatever, anything to attract children that will attract families. And again, it goes back to make sure that you can follow up appropriately, and so you need to register these people. And what I told about earlier was we would do a big block party event at our church, and we would have 400 or 500 people come through our event, and we would have everybody register. Everything was free, but you had to register, and then you got free tickets, and then you could turn in the tickets to eat the food and play the games and all that, and then we had a way to follow up with people because they registered to get the tickets. So a block party, special events at your church. I mentioned the one earlier that I told you I would tell you the story. Now, let me just give you a disclaimer, because when I tell this story, a lot of times people look at me really strange, but you can verify this. You can. It's true, but it is, in my life, it was that once-in-a-lifetime God experience that completely blew us away. But we had a drama called Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames. Many of you may have heard of it. We did it right, the real way, where you actually hire their production team from New York City that comes in and they set up your stage, or that your people do it, but they bring all the stuff that you set up, and you set up this elaborate set. Your people are the actors, but they appoint people to the roles and give you the scripts and run through the rehearsals and all of that kind of stuff. And then you pray together. It is like a revival experience. We did it at our church the very first time, the weekend before Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. And that's significant and important because we had it scheduled for 3 nights, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, of this week before Katrina hit. And we planned, and we thought if we could have 100 people make decisions at the altar, this thing would be hugely successful. I mean, could you imagine 100 decisions? Thought that would be amazing. We did this event, and this is where I took the experts' advice. We did everything they told us to do, step by step, point by point. We did everything just like they told us. And the very first night, over 650 people showed up at our event to see the drama. Now, our church held about 600 people, and so we had chairs set up everywhere. We had a bunch of kids out because you need to be a certain age, because this drama is pretty intense in a lot of things. And so, but we had 650 people showed up. The very first night, over 100 people came forward and rededicated their life or gave their heart to Christ. Over 100 people the first night. We had it the 3 nights, and the production company said, well, we can stay a 4th night on Wednesday night. We can do it again. So without even any promotion or whatever, we held it over another night, had another record crowd. Well, that was when Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast, and our production team that was at our church was supposed to go to a church in New Orleans, but that church was destroyed by Katrina. And so he said, if you want us to stay here, we can hold it over another week. And so we held it over, and we did it 2 weeks, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and the first week we did it on Wednesday. So it was 7 nights total, and over 650 people made decisions for Christ. The Sunday after that, I baptized 51 people on one Sunday morning. It was the most incredible thing that we've ever seen. It so far exceeded our expectations. Now, again, like I said, don't go home and call this company and say, I want you to come, do this drama at our church because we want to see 650 people saved or whatever. We did it again 2 years later. We still had great results. We didn't have those kind of results, but it was that once-in-a-lifetime God experience where God just showed up above and beyond anything that we could have ever imagined or dreamed that God was going to do. But it was the most amazing event. We did it right on our own property with our own people, and it was the best revival that we ever had in our church, because it completely changed the direction of our church and everything that we did from that point on. It was just an amazing thing, but God just showed up. And that's what you pray for, and that's what you work towards, is that whatever you do and whatever these events are, that God is going to show up and God's going to bless them. And so use your imagination to do whatever you can, whether it's a block party or a drama, or we did exercise and weight loss classes at our church, and we told everybody to bring 2 cans of canned vegetables, and they used those for their weights, and then they left them. We donated them to the food bank after the class. I mean, anything you can do to get people to come for those, events or those things at your church or whatever. Special services, again, think about what your community needs. What's important things going on. Back several years ago at the same church where I was pastoring, we were always looking for great events to do, and of course there's always the big topic going on about creation versus evolution, and so we brought in the Creation Truth Foundation, and they set up our stage with live-sized dinosaur skeleton replicas. And so I'm talking about like T-Rexes that are like 16 feet tall or whatever, all over our stage. And Dr. G. Thomas Sharp from the Creation Truth Foundation came and did several nights. Great crowds, people that were not, our church people came too, but other people from the community came because it was something that was interesting, that people were interested in. Did an excellent job of talking about creation and how creation does fit into the scientific blueprint of this world and all of that, if you'll look at it. And it was just such another very successful event that we would do. And then our Vacation Bible School. And you may think, well, we already do our Vacation Bible School. It's not that great. Well, make it great. Go above and beyond. I mean, we did things in our Vacation Bible School that you can't imagine. I mean, we just literally, not your typical VBS, but just think outside the box. Don't be afraid to bring experts in. Bring people in. I mean, you need to check them out, make sure they're sound, and make sure they fit into, your church and what you believe and all of that. You don't ever want to compromise what you believe for the sake of crowd or whatever. But there are people that can help you do various things, that can, come in and do kids crusades or whatever. And you have to pay for that stuff, though. I'll just warn you, some of it costs money. Costs a lot of money. The drama that I mentioned where we had great results, I don't even remember the total numbers. I think I tried to erase it from my mind, but it was something like $18,000 or something. I mean, it's expensive. But just the results are sometimes worth that expense. So there's all kinds of events you can do on-site, but then off-site events. This is where your church can get out into the community. You need to be doing some outreach outside of your church. And, that can be anything from random acts of kindness where you go to the park and hand out bottled water, or go to your city festival that your city has, whatever, and set up a tent and give away water, or give away, provide concessions of some type or food or whatever, but do some kind of something where people start to recognize who your church is in the community. And again, this is only limited by your imagination. My wife and I, several years ago, went to visit our oldest son, who lives in the Omaha, Nebraska area. And he has small children, and so we decided one Saturday morning to take the kids to the park. And so it was a beautiful summer day in Nebraska, very mild, just a beautiful day. And we took the kids to this park, and they were playing on the playground equipment. And way off in the corner, over in a grassy area, I saw this one single table set up, and 2 or 3 elderly people sitting behind that table, and a bunch of vegetables, homegrown garden vegetables on this table. And I told my wife and my son and daughter-in-law that were there, I said, I bet that's a church giving away vegetables. That just looks like a church sitting over there. And so I'm going to go over there and talk to them. So I walked over there, and lo and behold, this was a church. They weren't a large church, but they had a large area, a yard behind their church, and a lot of the older people in that church loved to garden. And so they planted a garden behind their church, and every week they would go through, or every day, whatever it was, and they would harvest the vegetables that were ripe, and on Saturday morning they would go to the park and set up this table, and they would give away these vegetables to whoever wanted them. And along with those vegetables, they would give you a little brochure about their church. And I told my wife that day, I said, we weren't going to be there on a Sunday, but I said, if we moved to the Omaha area and we brought our kids here, or grandkids, to play in this park, and I saw those people over there and went over there and got their vegetables, I think I'd go to church there on Sunday. Amen. I think I would. I would visit their church. And just little things like that just help people identify that, we care about you. They didn't want me to pay for that stuff. There was no gimmick to it. I told them I was from out of town, that I was a pastor, that we were just visiting our son. It didn't matter. They were just there to love on the community and to provide, a service, but also to get the name out about their church. It was a great thing that I think is just a good example of some things that we need to do. So there's all kinds of things. We went to a church in Oklahoma City after I went to work for the state denomination there, Free Will Baptist, at the state level, and our church cleaned up a city park. We adopted a park, and we would go and we'd pick up trash at the park. Now, there's nothing glamorous about picking up trash, but the park had a plaque that said these grounds were maintained or litter-free, whatever, by Kingsview Free Will Baptist Church. And that was a touch to our community from our church. And we would go and we took an ice chest and we'd had those popsicle things that are in the plastic sleeves, and we'd give those to kids and pick up trash. And that was just a way to touch our community and to reach out. And so, again, there's so many things you can do. I'll give you one last idea before I move on. And this is something that I always wanted to try, and I never did personally try it. And then I was in Oakland, Tennessee, talking to our church planter by the name of Tim Osborne. Now, Tim has since passed away. He died of cancer a couple of years ago. But we were talking about events, and I was telling Tim about this particular event. He said, we've done that. We did that just not that long ago here in Oakland. I said, tell me about it. I want to know how it went. He said, it was great. And here's what they did. They went to a local gas station. Now, this isn't quite as attractive today when gas prices are down as it is when gas prices are high. But they went to a local gas station and they said, we want to do a gas buy down. And so between the hours of like 1 and 2:30 or whatever on this particular day, we want to be able to put up signs that says gas is 50 cents a gallon cheaper at your place than it is anywhere else in town, and we're going to pay the 50 cents a gallon difference. And he said they had $1,000 to spend on this event. And so if you do the math, you can buy 2,000 gallons of gas. You can buy down the price, 50 cents a gallon, with $1,000, 2,000 gallons of gas. And if the average car fills up with 15 gallons, you can help 133 cars filled up with people that you have a connection with now to your church. And what they did at Faith Free Will Baptist Church in Oakland, Tennessee, is they made up packets, and they said, Faith Free Will Baptist Church, all the information about their church and all that kind of stuff. And when people they had cars, he said, lined up all the way down the highway to get this gas for 50 cents a gallon cheaper. And he said when they came up, they not only pumped the gas for them like the old-fashioned gas stations did, they washed their windows, they talked to them, they told them about their church. They said, can I leave this information with you? Well, what heel is going to not take your information if you just saved them a bunch of money on buying gas? They took their money, their information about their church, and that was a huge success for them. And that would cost you $1,000. But think about 133 cars that could have 2, 3, 4, 5 people in them, whatever. You're doing a huge, nice gesture to your community, but it is an awesome outreach for your church. And I guarantee you that if somebody decides some Sunday morning they think they probably ought to go to church on Easter or for a Christmas service or whatever, they're going to think about your church. Now, I told this earlier, and I want to give this disclaimer again. Just because you do an outreach event at your church doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have 100 new people show up the very next week, okay? Sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes it takes multiple touches for people to connect with your church. But that's why your church needs to have a logo that people can recognize. Your name needs to be recognizable so that people know who you are and all of that sort of stuff. But all of that is important in just helping people connect with your church and the community. So that's off-site events. Let's talk about some general outreach. I'm not even on my right thing, am I? Oh, it's over. Okay, we're done. Oh, not really done. My slides are just out. General outreach ideas. These are things that are ongoing that I want you to think about, okay? One is just saturation campaigns where you touch the community. Okay, I already hit on this a little bit, but these are things that, when you do saturation campaigns where you hang flyers on doors or whatever, again, statistically, the results from things you hang on people's door are next to zero. I mean, they're very, very low return. Okay, so again, don't go out and hang up 1,000 door flyers and expect 100 people to show up, but it's worth it because you're making a touch to that house, and they're recognizing your name as somebody that cares about the community and doing something to reach out. Now, there's pros and cons that I know. We did a saturation campaign in Erie, Pennsylvania with one of our church planners, and a guy's dog jumped up on the back of the couch when they walked up to the door, knocked their lamp off, broke the lamp. The guy was irate, called the church and wanted the church to replace the lamp. That can happen. If that happens, replace the lamp and just go on, be kind, all of that. Weird stuff happens, but you're touching the community. You can't expect immediate results from campaigns like that, but again, they have to be used in series along with other things. And every time we did an outreach event at our church, and when I do this with other churches, I encourage you to piggyback it with other things. When you do our kids carnival, we always did that in the kind of the middle of the summer, and in that event we would promote our Vacation Bible School, which is what we always did at the end of summer. And then at Vacation Bible School you promote your back to school stuff, and then at back to school you start promoting fall stuff, and then at fall you start promoting Christmas. So you're always promoting the next thing, and you're always moving forward in all these types of things that build off of each other. Let me quickly just mention a couple other things. We're out of time, but social media. Social media is a huge thing, especially among young people. I know most people say, I hate that stuff. I don't know why everybody's on Facebook, because everybody I talk to hates it, but everybody's on it, so I don't know. But it's free advertising for your church, and if it's used in the right way, it can be a huge tool. So social media and your website. Oh, I can't say enough about this, and I don't have any time to say it, but every church needs a good website that's kept up to date. I shared earlier with the people in the seminar that, and I forget the exact number, but it's almost 90%, like 89% or something of people that are 40 and under will visit your church website before they ever come to your church. And so you need to have a good website that is, relevant and that is accurate. And all of that. I already talked about signage and the appearance of your building, all that sort of thing. Make sure all of that is on point and they're advertise everything you do. Make sure it's done the very best way you can. And then the third piece, that was the planning, the event, and now follow-up. And we're out of time. I don't have time to go into this. And I don't know if you can tell, but I've begun talking faster and faster and faster and faster. But I'm trying to get it all in. But normally, see, when I get in this situation where I have 2 minutes left and I still have like 3 pages of notes, I tell people I'm from California, so I talk fast. Well, we're in California. That didn't help me here. But the follow-up aspect is so important because, again, if you have this huge event but you can't follow up with people, then you may have had a great event and maybe bless people for that day, and that's good, but you want to have the opportunity to follow up with people. And so figure out a way, whatever it is. And again, there's not a right way and a wrong way, but you've got to be able to follow up with people. And so make sure you get critical information in everything that you do, whether it's a registration table when you do a carnival type thing or a fall festival or Easter egg hunt. Before you let kids participate in the Easter egg hunt, you can at least get their name, phone number, and email address, or their parents. And so that, with that information, you can at least send them an email. You can at least text message them, or you can follow up in some way. And the same with your church. When people come to your church, I know sometimes the foyer gets crowded and people slip in, and that's why it's so important to have more than just a greeter at the door. And we don't have time to get into all that today, but there are so many things that you need to do to make sure that people get followed up with in your church. Now, with that, there's a caution because you need to make sure that people understand appropriate things that you do and don't do. And that, again, is relevant to your culture. Where I pastored in Oklahoma, it was a very, friendly kind of rural area, and it was nothing for somebody to come knock on your door and you just, hey, what you doing? Come on in, or get a cup of coffee together or whatever. Some communities aren't like that. I understand that. And that would be more difficult to do in Nashville. People aren't quite that open. And so you have to do it, figure out a way that works in your community. But you've got to figure out a way to follow up with people that is real and that's authentic and in a way that people are comfortable with that. And so, whenever you think about your follow-up, that's another, assimilation is a completely different system from outreach, but it's important that we talk about it and what your follow-up strategy is, because your church can only sustain or grow not based on the success of your outreach, but it depends on the success of your follow-up. Does that make sense? I'm not sure I said that in the best way, but again, you can have great outreach, but if you have terrible follow-up, then your church is only going to grow proportionately to your follow-up, not your outreach, because you've got to be able to follow up with these people. And so there are things that you can do, and you need to know ahead of time what you're going to do. And so that's why I'm a big advocate of systems, and you need to have an assimilation system that every Monday morning you have if your church doesn't have a secretary or whatever, you have a volunteer that comes in and that enters visitor information into a database or a spreadsheet or whatever, so that they can be followed up on. And then Monday evening, a gift is dropped off at their house, a thank you for visiting, or they get a text message or they get an email, whatever it is. You need to know what that's going to be, so every Monday this is going to happen. And then on Tuesdays, we're going to do this. And then on Wednesdays, we're going to, have special prayer time for all the visitors that came. And then Thursday, we're going to do this, or whatever that looks like. And however you figure it out is fine. But you need to have a system so that you know what you're going to do, and then follow through with it every single week so that it's consistent and your people know what to expect. One of the things that we did on that huge event, the drama that I mentioned earlier, we were not prepared. We were not prepared for 652 decisions, just be honest. And we didn't have the follow-up in place to follow up with that many people. And we noticed, though, we had a place on our decision card that we had specially made for this event, because we knew other churches were going to bring people from their churches and that sort of thing. And it wasn't our goal to proselyte other people from other churches or whatever. And so if they put a church that they came with on that card, we mailed those cards to that church and asked them to follow up on them, because there was no way we could follow up on enough. And we had 20-something churches that we sent cards to and asked them to follow up on certain people. We still had over 150 people that we personally had to follow up with, and we didn't do a good job that first year. We still saw great results, and people came and God blessed, and our church grew overnight because of that event. But then the next time, 2 years later, we did the drama again, and I told our people well in advance, said, hey, we don't know what God's going to do this time. If God does again what he did last time, we need to be prepared. And so we put in a system for follow-up, and we already had teams appointed. We had a strategy. We knew how we were going to follow up. And it made the follow-up so much better the next time. Even though we didn't have near the numbers, we had a better plan to follow up with them. And so, think through everything that you're going to do every day so that, you can follow up appropriately with every people. And then, if these people come back for a second time at your church, you need to have in your system, your assimilation system, how do you follow up with second-time visitors or guests at your church? Then if they come back a third time, how do you follow up with them? And then how do you connect them and get them involved in Sunday school? How do you talk to them about becoming a member, once they become Christians? All of those things are very important to think through as you think about your follow-up and how that you are going to help people in the community get to your church and then make a connection to your church so they can hear the gospel and then hopefully be saved and become a part of your church. Outreach, again, I want to just reiterate what I said at the very beginning. Outreach is the only way that you will see significant and sustainable growth in your church. If your church is plateaued, or if your church is struggling, if you're in decline or whatever, I encourage you to look at your outreach and think about what are we doing to reach people in this community for Christ, and look around, talk to community leaders, all those things that I said. Just do something to make sure that you are trying to fulfill needs that are in your community, and then make your church different from every other church by doing something to meet the needs. One last quick story and I'm done. When I was pastoring, we did the saturation campaign, and we had committed to hang a door flyer on every house in our city. And for us, that was like 5,000, a little over 5,000 homes in our surrounding area. 3,000 homes in our community. And so we set out to do that over a period of time. And I remember one day I was sitting in the office at the church and the phone rang, and it was a lady I didn't know, and she said, "You don't know me," she said, "but somebody put your church flyer on my door this weekend." And she said, "I just wanted to call and say thank you." She said, I'm a member at another church. She called the name of the church there in town. And she said, "I don't think anybody in our church would ever even come together and get organized enough to go out and put flyers on other people's doors." And she said, "I'll never come to your church probably." She said, "Because I'm committed to my church or whatever." She said, "But I just wanted to call and say thank you." And I'm telling you, if you can get your community's attention like that, if that lady ever did have a need that her church couldn't meet or whatever, she might just come to our church, or her family might, or you never know. Again, it may not be immediate results, but outreach is the only way that we're going to really make an impact on our community. Let's pray together. Father, we're thankful for the time that we have to share together, and I pray that somehow through just this rushed attempt that I've made this afternoon to try to get a lot of information into this point of time, that you would somehow just spark a thought in each person here, their mind, and that you would just help it to blossom and to grow into an idea that they could implement in their church. Father, I pray for every church that's represented here and every leader that is here, that you would just help us to get a passion for our communities, and that we would care about the things that are needed, and that we would reach out into our community, try to meet needs, and ultimately to connect with people in our community, to be able to meet needs and be able to have an opportunity to share the gospel with them. And Father, I pray that you would just use this time together today for your honor and glory, for it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, real quickly, I just want to mention we're going to take a break for dinner. So we're going to take about a 2-hour break, and we're going to meet here again tonight at 6:30, and so I would encourage you to come out. I know that Brother David is seeming to feel better, so continue to lift him up in prayer. He's not been feeling well today, so lift him up. Let's pray for him, and then let's gather again tonight and enjoy some worship and a good message. Amen? All right, let's go enjoy dinner.